So hello and welcome back yet again. We are back with Beverly of Graustark, who, you know, it seems like she's still harboring hope that maybe, just maybe, Baldos is a prince, but now she's also harboring the thought that if he is a prince, he might have a betrothed, or possibly even a wife, which would make all of his actions towards her probably seem very, very, very improper. So she seems to be on the horns of quite the dilemma. Um, I also skimmed ahead a little bit in this, and unfortunately, Aunt Fanny is back in this chapter. So, yet again, just letting everybody know, I am not reading the character of Aunt Fanny as she is written because it is extremely derogatory and extremely racist. The characterization of her is terrible, so I will be just summing up what Aunt Fanny says and kind of translating it because I don't like the way she's written, and this book is in the public domain, which means I am free to change it, which is good. Just figured I'd let you guys know that. Basically, I'm just going to read Aunt Fanny not as a racist caricature. Anyway, that's about it. We're going to be jumping back into chapter 21 of Beverly of Graustark by George Barr McCutcheon, and chapter 21 is titled The Rose. The next morning, Aunt Fanny had a hard time of it. Her mistress was petulant. There was no sunshine in the bright August day as it appeared to her. Towards dawn, after she had counted many millions of black sheep jumping backwards over a fence, she had finally fallen asleep. Aunt Fanny obeyed her usual instructions on this very unlucky morning. It was Beverly's rule to be called every morning at 7 o'clock, but how was her attendant to know that the graceful young creature who had kicked the counterpane to the foot of the bed and mauled the pillow out of all shape had only slept for less than 30 minutes? How was she to know that the flushed face and frown were born in the course of a night of distressing perplexities? She knew only that the sleeping beauty who lay before her was the fairest creature in all the universe. For a few moments, Aunt Fanny stood off and admired the rich, youthful glory of the sleeper, prophetically reluctant to disturb her happiness. But then she obeyed the impulse of duty and spoke the summoning words. What time is it?" demanded the newcomer from the land of Nod, stretching her fine young body with a splendid but discontented yawn. "It's 7, Miss Beverly. What time do you think it is? It's the regular time, of course. Did you have a nice sleep?" And Aunt Fanny went blissfully about the business of the hour. "I didn't sleep a wink, confound it," grumbled Beverly, rubbing her eyes and turning on her back to glare up at the tapestry above the couch. "You weren't winking at all when I first came into the room, let me tell you." Aunt Fanny laughed. "See here now, Aunt Fanny, I'm not going to stand any lectures from you this morning. When a fella hasn't slept a—" "Who is lecturing you? That's what I'd like to know. I'm just telling you what you were doing when I came into the room. You were sleeping pretty doggone tight, let me tell you. Are you gonna go for a walk before breakfast like you usually do? Because if you are, I would be obliged to have you climb out of that bed really quickly. Your bath is ready, Miss Beverly." Beverly splashed in the water with unreasonable ferocity for a few minutes, trying to enjoy a diversion that had not failed until this morning. "Aunt Fanny," she announced after looking darkly through her window into the mountains above. If you can't brush my hair any easier than this, I'm going to have somebody else do it, that's all. You're just a regular old bear. You poor baby, was the complacent words in reply. Well, said Beverly, with a shake of her head, you just be careful. Have you heard the news? What news is that, Miss Beverly? We're going back to Washington. Oh, thank goodness. When? I don't know. I just made up my mind right now. I think we'll start, let's see, this is the 6th of August, isn't it? Well, look and see if you don't know. Is it the 10th? Oh my goodness, where is time gone? We'll start sometime between the 11th and the 12th. Of this month, Miss Beverly? No, September. I want you to look up a timetable for me today. We need to find out about the trains. There's only one leaving here daily, and it leaves at 6 in the morning. Only one train a day. Isn't that just scandalous? Oh, I'm sure, Aunt Fanny. It's their business, not ours. Maybe they could be running an excursion in September, Miss Beverly, said Aunt Fanny. They usually have excursions in September. Yo goose, said Beverly. Aren't you having a nice time here? No, I'm not. Oh, for land's sake, I would not have suspicioned it for a moment. It's the happiest place I've ever seen, except for Washington and Lexington and Vicksburg. Well, you just don't know nothing, said Beverly. I wish you'd take that red feather out of my hat right now. Should I throw it away for you? Well, no, you needn't do that, said Beverly. Put it on my dressing table. I'll deal with it. And what's become of the gentleman who had that feather in the first place? I haven't seen him for 2 or 3 days. I'm sure I don't know, said Beverly. He's probably asleep. That class of people never lose sleep over nothing. He's a powerfully good-looking man, suggested Aunt Fanny, and Beverly's eyes brightened. Oh, don't you think he is? Said Beverly. What are you doing with that? I'm taking out the feather like you. Oh, just leave it alone. Don't disturb my things, Aunt Fanny. How many times do I have to tell you? Oh, good Lord, was all that Aunt Fanny could say. Now, don't you forget about the timetables, said Beverly as she sallied forth for a walk in the park. Later that afternoon, she went driving with Princess Yetive and the young Duke of Mizrox, upon whose innocent and sufficiently troubled head Beverly was heaping sufficient secret abuse because of the news he had brought. Later on, Count Marlanx appeared at the castle for his first lessons in poker. He looked so sure of himself that Beverly just hated him to the point of desperation. At the same time, she was eager to learn how matters were standing with Baldos. The Count's threat still hung over her head, veiled by its ridiculous shadow of mercy. She knew him well enough by this time to feel convinced that Baldos would have to account for his temetry sometime sooner rather than later. Marlanx was like a cat with a helpless mouse. It's too hot, said Beverly when he said that he was ready for his game. Nobody plays poker when it's 92 degrees in the shade. But, Your Highness, said the Count, war may break out any day. I cannot concede a delay. I think there's a game called shooting craps, she said serenely. It seems to me that would be particularly good for warriors. You could be shooting something all the time." He left in a decidedly irascible frame of mind. Beverly did not know it, but Baldos was soon after sent to work in the garrison stables, a most loathsome occupation, along with his duties as a night guard. After mature deliberation, Beverly set herself to the task of writing home to her father. It was her supreme intention to convince him that she would be off for the States in an amazingly short time. The major, upon receiving the letter 3 weeks later, found nothing in it to warrant the belief that she was ever coming home. He did observe, however, that she had but little use for the army of Graustark, and was especially disappointed in the set of men that Yetive retained as a private guard. For the life of her, Beverly could not have told why she disapproved of the guard in general or in particular, but she was conscious of the fact that after the letter was posted, she said many things that might better have been left unwritten. Besides, it was not Baldos's fault that she couldn't sleep. That was her own fault. He had nothing to do with it. "I bet my father will be glad to learn that I'm coming home," said Beverly to Yetive after she had posted the letter. "Oh, Beverly, dear, I do hate to think of your going," said the princess. "When did you tell him you would leave?" "Why, let me see, what did I say? Dash me, as Mr. Anguish would say. I don't think I gave him a date. It seems to me that I said soon, and that's all." "Oh, you don't know how relieved that makes me," said Yetive. And Beverly was in a high dudgeon because of the implied reflection. "I do believe that you might be in a tiff with Baldos," said Yetive. "Oh, goodness! How foolish you can be sometimes, Yetive," was what Beverly said to Her Highness, the Princess of Graustark. Late that evening, couriers came in from the Dawsbergen frontier with reports which created considerable excitement in the castle and army circles. Prince Gabriel himself had been seen in the northern part of his domain, accompanied by a large detachment of hand-picked soldiers. Grenfall Lorry set out that very night for the frontier, happy in the belief that something worthwhile was about to occur. General Marlanx issued orders for the Edelweiss Army Corps to mass beyond the southern gates of the city the next morning. Commands were also sent to the outlying garrisons. There was to be a general movement of troops before the end of the week. Graustark would not be caught napping. Long after the departure of Lorry and Anguish, the princess sat on the balcony with Beverly and the Countess Dagmar. They didn't talk very much. The mission of these venturesome young American husbands was full of danger. Something in the air told their wives that the first blows of the war were to be struck before they looked again upon the men that they loved. "I think that we have been betrayed by someone," said Dagmar, after a very long silence. The others did not reply. "The couriers say Gabriel knows where we are weakest at the front, and that he knows our every movement. Yet if I believe there is a spy here after all." "And that spy has access to the very heart of our deliberations," said Beverly. "I say this in behalf of the man who you evidently suspect. He could not know about all these things." "I do not say that he does know, Miss Calhoun, but it is not beyond reason that he may be the go-between, the means of transferring information from the main trader to the messengers who are outside our walls." "Oh, I don't believe that," said Beverly. "I wonder. I wonder if these things would never have happened if Baldos had never come to Edelweiss. As though by common impulse, both of the Graustark women placed their arms around Beverly. "It is because we have so much at stake, Beverly dear," whispered Dagmar. "Forgive me if I've hurt you." Of course, Beverly sobbed a little in the effort to convince them that she did not care who they accused, if he proved to be the right man in the end. They left her on the balcony. For an hour after midnight, she sat there and she dreamed. Everyone was ready to turn against Baldos. Even she had been harsh towards him, for had she not seen him relegated to the most obnoxious of duties after promising him a far different life? And now what was he thinking of her? His descent from favor had followed upon the disclosures which made plain to each the identity of the other. No doubt he was attributing his degradation in a sense to the fact that she no longer relished his service, having seen a romantic little ideal shattered by his assertions. Of course, Beverly knew that General Marlanx was alone instrumental in assigning him to the unpleasant duty that he was now in, but how was Baldos to know that she was not the real power behind the Iron Count? Soon a light drizzle began to fall, cold and disagreeable. There were no stars, no moon. The ground below was black with shadows, but shimmering in spots touched by the park lamps. Beverly retreated through her window, determined to go to bed. Her rebellious brain, however, refused to banish him from her thoughts. She wondered if he were patrolling the castle grounds in the rain, in all that lonely darkness. Seized by a sudden inspiration, she threw a gossamer around her and grasped an umbrella and ventured out upon the balcony once more. Guiltily, she searched the night through the fine drizzling rain. Her ears listened eagerly for the tread which was so well known to her. At last, he strode by beneath a lamp not far away. He looked up, but of course could not see her against the dark wall. For a long time he stood motionless below the light. She couldn't help seeing that he was dejected and tired and unhappy. His shoulders drooped, and there was a general air of listlessness around the figure which had once been so full of courage and hope. The post light fell directly upon his face, and it was somber, despondent, strained. He wore the air of a prisoner. Her heart went out to him like a flash. The debonair knight of the Black Patch was no more, and in his place there stood a sullen slave to discipline. "Baldos!" she called softly, her voice penetrating the dripping air with the clarity of a bell. He must have been longing for the sound of it, for he started and looked eagerly in her direction. His tall form straightened as he passed his hand over his brow. It was but a voice from his dream, he thought. "Aren't you afraid you're going to get wet?" said the same low, sweet voice, with the suggestion of a laugh behind it. With long strides, he crossed the pavement and stood almost directly below her. "Your Highness!" he cried, gently and joyously. "What are you doing out here?" "Wondering, Baldos. Wondering what you were thinking of as you stood under the lamp over there." "I was thinking of your Highness," he called softly. "No, no," she protested. "I, too, was wondering what you were dreaming of as you slept. For you should be asleep at this hour, your Highness, instead of standing out there in the rain." "Baldos," she called down tremulously, "you don't like this work, do you?" "It has nothing but darkness in it for me. I never see the light of your eyes. I never feel the...
Shh! You must not talk like that. It's not proper, and besides, somebody might be listening. The night has 1,000 ears, or is it eyes? But listen, tomorrow you shall be restored to your old duties. You surely cannot believe that I had anything to do with the order which compels you to work at this unholy hour.
I was afraid you were punishing me for my boldness. My heart has been sore. You can never know how sore. I was disgraced, dismissed, forgotten.
No, you were not. You must not say that. Go away now, Baldos. You will ride with me tomorrow. Please, go to some place where you won't get dripping wet.
You forget that I'm on guard, he said with a laugh. But you are a wise counselor. Is the rain so pleasant to you?
I have an umbrella, she told him. What are you doing?
She cried in alarm. He was coming hand over hand up the trellis work that enclosed the veranda. I am coming to a place where I won't get dripping wet, he told her. There was a dangerous ring in his voice, and she pulled back in a panic.
You must not, she said. This is madness. Get down, sir.
I am happy enough to fly, but I cannot. So I do the next best thing. I climb to you. His arm was across the stone railing by this time, and he was panting from exertion not 2 feet from where she was crouching. Just 1 minute of heaven before I go back to the shadows of the earth, and I am happy once again. Marlanx told me that you had dismissed me. I wonder what he's holding in reserve for me. I knew he lied, but it is not until now that I rejoice. Come, you shield me from the rain.
Oh,
gasped Beverly, overwhelmed by his daring passion.
I would just die if anybody saw you here.
Yet she extended the umbrella so that it covered him and left her in the drizzle. And so should I, he told her softly. Listen to me. For hours and hours I've been longing for the dear old hills in which you found me. I wanted to crawl out of Edelweiss and lose myself forever in the rocks and crags. Tonight, when you saw me, I was trying to say goodbye to you forever. I was trying to make up my mind to desert. I couldn't endure the new order of things. You had cast me off. My friends out there were eager to have me with them. In this city, as everyone is ready to call me a spy, even you, I thought. Life was black and drear, and now, my princess, it's bright as heaven itself.
You must not talk like this, she whispered. You're making me sorry I called to you.
I would have heard if you had only whispered, my rain princess. I have no right to talk of love. I'm a vagabond, but I have a heart, and it's a bold one. Perhaps I dream that I am here beside you, so near that I can touch your face, but it is the sweetest of dreams. But for it, I should have left Edelweiss weeks ago. I hope to never awaken from this dream. You cannot rob me of the joys of dreaming. Under the spell of his passion, Beverly drew nearer to him as he clung strongly to the rail. The roses at her throat came so close that he could bury his face in them. Her hand touched his cheek, and he kissed the palm again and again, his wet lips stinging her blood to the tips of her toes.
Go away, please, she implored. Don't you see that you must not stay here now?
A rose, my princess. One rose to kiss all through the night long, he whispered. Beverly could feel his eyes burning into her heart. With trembling, hurried fingers, she tore loose a rose. He could not seize it with his hands because of the position that he held, and Beverly laughed tantalizingly. Then she kissed it and pressed it up against his mouth. His lips and his teeth closed over the stem, and the rose was his.
"Be careful. There are thorns,"
she whispered. "They're the riches of the poor," he murmured with a bit of difficulty, but she understood him. "Now go," she said, drawing resolutely away. An instant later, his head disappeared below the rail. Peering over the side, she saw his figure spring easily to the ground, and then came the rapid, steady tramp as he went on his dreary patrol.
"I just couldn't help it,"
she whispered to herself, torn between joy and shame. Glancing instinctively out towards the solitary lamp, she saw 2 men standing in its light. One of them was General Marlanx, and the other she knew was the spy that watched Baldos. Beverly's heart sank like lead when she saw that the 2 men were peering intently towards the balcony where she stood, and where Baldos had been clinging not a moment before. And that is the end of the chapter. And is it just me, or does every single chapter in this book end on sort of a cliffhanger? I don't know if that's like a writing style that was more common back then, or if I'm just really noticing it in this one, but it feels like every single chapter has ended on a cliffhanger of some sort. It kind of reminds me of a lot of like older TV shows, or maybe soap operas. Maybe that's what this reminds me of. You know, I never really got massively into many soap operas, but I did watch one from, oh geez, grade school until high school, and then I fell off for a little while, and then I watched it again for a little while when I was in my early 20s, and then it fell away from it again. Do they even still do soap operas? I feel like that was such a big part of my childhood, like different people that I knew that would watch different soap operas, and some people would watch General Hospital and other people would watch One Life to Live. And that's, now that I'm thinking about it, that is really what this is reminding me of. This feels very soap opera-esque. So maybe it's not so much a Harlequin romance. Maybe this is like One Life to Live, the Royals edition. I don't know. I'm enjoying it though. I am having a good time. It does feel very over the top, and I enjoy that about it. In fact, the only thing I really don't like about this is the portrayal of Aunt Fanny, but that is probably of its time and not so much. I don't feel like it was done maliciously, and in some ways, that's what makes it worst of all, is that it wasn't really done maliciously. It was just done because that was the way everything was back then. And yeah, the one thing I don't like about this book. And honestly, I feel like Aunt Fanny's character isn't even really necessary to the story, which trivializes it even more and makes her portrayal even worse. I don't know. You guys will have to let me know what you think. But thank you for listening. Please do leave me a thumbs up if you don't mind. It does always make me happy. And I will see you with more of Miss Beverly tomorrow.